All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We have a very special annuals episode here. There are 4 Marvel Annuals in 1968, but we will be doing 2 of them today due to continuity issues. And for this very special Annuals episode, we have a very special guest, Zack Smith. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay. Hi, name's Zack Smith. I haven't been writing in a while. I used to write for the site Newsarama for about a decade and kind of lost track of things once I started doing some grad school and then got a day job. Oh, and there was COVID all in the middle of that. But I've been reading comics since, I was a kid. And I've interviewed quite a few comic creators. Been a regular at Heroes Con since 19... and was going there as a fan. And I published a couple of comic book stories back then, like 2 or 3 of them, which you could get on Comixology, but I don't think there's Comixology anymore, is there?
Oh, did that go away? I didn't know that.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
That's about who I am. And I've known Steve for I saw him at Heroes Con really for years, and then I was at Asheville it was a Patton Oswalt comedy show.
Yep.
And afterwards I just hey, I think I recognize you from some comic thing, and just friended on Facebook and corresponded since, and he's been a very good friend at shows and a regular invite to when I get group dinners together, which get harder and harder every year, but people keep having kids and stuff like that.
I think we met once, and then you Facebook friended me afterwards, and you are very active on Facebook and just a delight. You're just a delightful presence on Facebook. You post a lot of very funny stuff.
Oh gosh, thanks.
About your comics journalism background, but also about all kinds of stuff that you're interested in. I feel like now that we are best of friends because we are each posting on Facebook every day, and I'm reading all about your life and all about all sorts of wonderful things you do. But let's talk about your comics journalism career. Who would you say are the biggest names that you've interviewed?
Probably Alan Moore. I did a couple things. I got lucky. He was putting out League of Extraordinary Gentlemen through Top Shelf, and I'd done a lot of interviews with Top Shelf creators at the time. So that was quite an interesting Skype there. As a disembodied voice, he has that kind of godlike presence.
Very cool.
I did a couple of Grant Morrison that turned out really well. There was one that I did by email at the end of All-Star Superman, and I wrote a whole mess of questions, and then he answered all of them, and it was so much that we ran it as a 10-part series, and he actually used some of the answers as text in the backup materials for the Absolute edition of All-Star Superman. That was a big thrill, though my name was not put on it, and then I complained, and DC sent me a certified letter so I can show that if I need to prove it. Similar good email result was early on. I did one with Garth Ennis about Hitman, and again, it was a whole lot of questions, and he answered everything. And that was a big geek out for me because I loved that particular book by him, and he had, really good thoughts. There are a couple I did with Christopher Priest that I was also really happy about, which a couple by email. That is another guy who loves to, give very detailed, thoughtful answers to things. There was one I did on Deathstroke when he was finishing his run on that. And he actually said the answers back as a whole PDF of all these panels picked out and arranged carefully around the questions. And I was like, guys, why don't we just run it like this? I don't think we need to try to form. Because no, just excise all the screenshots he sent you, just send them. But it was one of the only times I'd seen someone really think through an interview visually as well. So those I would say were some of the biggest names I've done. At least the ones who haven't been outed as predators or whatever.
Eventually they'll all be eliminated. Eventually everyone will be canceled, and then then we'll be left with nothing.
I had finding a photo of me with Julia Schwartz at my very first Heroes Con was then subsequently dulled by finding out, here's how he treated women.
Oh, no. Oh, well.
Talk to Colleen Doran or...
Okay.
But, I've really been lucky that I've gotten to, meet or talk to a lot of people whose work meant a lot to me personally throughout my life, and, really dig into it with people and, be able to ask very personal questions about stuff, and that really adds to the experience.
Oh yeah,
and sharing that has been very nice. Hopefully, some of my stuff that's still online has affected other people, and help them get more enjoyment or discover things. But there's not a lot of people left who I'd still want to interview. I would say, if Bill Watterson, if somehow you hear this, let you guys know that you're hearing this, because I think it would be a big thrill for them. But you're like you or Miyazaki. Those are like some I'd like to make some time.
You're willing to learn Japanese if that's what it takes. So what about tonight's comics? Let's go ahead and start transferring to tonight's comics. Have you ever had a chance to talk to Roy Thomas or Jim Steranko or anyone else who is still alive from tonight's comics?
I actually have. I interviewed Roy 2 times. One was for an article for Back Issue magazine on the short-lived 1970s black and white Marvel mag, Unknown Worlds of Science Fiction. See a few other people who had things published in that, and they were very sweet people. And another time was for a history of Captain Marvel, not Marvel, but I did that, and that ran on Newsarama, and again, many parts, and got reprinted a few times, and I was psyched about that. And he was fine. He was a nice fellow. I wouldn't say we became like best friends or anything from it.
Yeah,
I've always had a great admiration for his work as a writer, an editor, as a journalist, and his story.
Oh yeah.
He's really helped bring a lot of history and kept a lot of things alive, both to bring back characters and getting things reprinted, overseeing a lot of reprint volumes. I do feel these days that every time he opens his mouth, he damages his legacy a bit. Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah, like claiming that he gets creator credit for Wolverine when he really shouldn't, and things like that. But
and then I was just reading a thing where he was like, he just had a whole series of citations where, well, my wife actually came up with this. My wife actually came up with that. Oh, she didn't want credit on the script. And then there was Claire Noto had an interview last summer about having to deal with him while she was doing Red Sonja in the 1970s.
Oh, well.
And Steranko's a similar case. I was really thrilled the first time. I never interviewed, but I saw him at con several times. I was really thrilled to get an autograph with him first time. He was, he's such a big character. I'm sure you've seen it at Heroes Comics. And that is another case where I haven't read anything by him in several years, but the stuff he was posting on what used to be known as Twitter was getting all conservatives. And I was like, oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, he's big MAGA. So let's go ahead and get into talking some comics here. Matt, I think that we talked about doing Avengers first, and that you said you wanted to take the lead on Avengers. Is that correct?
Yeah, so let's go ahead and jump in. We thought about doing all 4 annuals in one episode, but then we said, no, well, Avengers has to go here because it follows directly on from the last issue of Avengers, which was the last thing we discussed in our previous episode. So we said, it'd be nice to go ahead and have one guest here to do Avengers and Hulk this week. And then the Fantastic Four clearly goes a couple months from now because there is a baby born, spoiler, in that annual.
Oh, gosh, I love that issue. I reprint of it in a giant size thing from the 70s. And I was like, that's a great story.
Sorry you didn't get that one. But
I blame Steve.
Yes.
Blame Steve. So we're going to go ahead and handle Avengers and Hulk today. Let's go ahead and jump in with Avengers Annual number 2. Let me go ahead and pull it up here. Avengers Annual number 2. So this is, unfortunately, a big tease. It says King Size Special, The Avengers number 2, The New Avengers versus The Old Avengers. We have a gorgeous John Buscema cover.
Both of these are books you cannot judge by their covers because the covers are fantastic, and it does not really match what you get on the inside.
No.
Both of the annuals have legendary covers, but not matching the insides. Although I'm a big fan of the art in the Hulk issue. I'm not a big fan of the art in this issue.
Well, you have John in the back of this issue.
What?
He does the backup story in this issue. I think
he does.
Yes.
We will get to that. That is fascinating. So let's go and jump in. Right away, you get to the splash page, and womp wah. Perhaps the most incredible Avengers story yet, presented with pride by Stanley editor, Roy Thomas writer, Don Heck and Werner Roth pencilers, Vince Coletta inker, Joe Rosen letterer. So we've got Marvel's maybe two worst pencilers and certainly Marvel's worst inker doing the book on the inside. Quite disappointing, especially because this is part 2 of a 2-part story that began with beautiful Buscema Klein art in Avengers number 56 that we discussed last episode. And right away here on the first page, it looks awful. You've got the Avengers walking in a crowd in downtown New York, but there is a huge blob underneath the Avengers that you realize has to be their shadow. But trying to line this shadow up with anything that may be casting it is a fool's errand. It is a bizarre blob. And then you're like, okay, I guess that's a shadow. Well, just to confirm, let me look at the other shadows of the other people in the street. And then you look at the shadows of the other people on the street and you realize all of their shadows are going different directions because nobody cared.
It's not the only problem with shadows we will have with these annuals, but
yes, well, shadows are a much bigger deal in the Hulk annual, as we'll get to.
Yes,
shadows come alive in that one. We begin with the Avengers, which at this point consists of Goliath, Hawkeye, Captain America, who is back with the gang, at least temporarily, Black Panther, and Wasp, are walking down the street. No one seems to recognize them. They're a little confused. As you recall, last time we saw them, they had gone to upstate New York. I don't know if they've ever actually confirmed it's upstate New York, but I think they later would, to Dr. Doom's castle in upstate New York, where they were mucking around with the time machine to go back and make sure Bucky was really dead, which they falsely believed they had made sure of that. And so then they came home and suddenly no one remembers them. They then go to their headquarters, and right away, lots of little things are off about it. Then they go to the meeting room, and there are the old Avengers meeting in the meeting room. So you've got not Goliath, but Giant Man. You've got the old Wasp with her old pointy head thingy on, Iron Man, Thor, and Hulk. They quickly get into a big fight, of course, as you always have to do whenever two groups of heroes meet. Unfortunately, throughout this issue, it just sort of ends up where Black Panther keeps having to fight the Hulk, which is, like, I don't think that's a very fair fight, but that's they're sort of permanently paired up here. I don't know if T'Challa got asked about this or got to have a vote in this particular decision.
Like literally punching above your weight.
Yes, they're fighting, but then Hawkeye launches some smog arrows, and I do kind of like the heck tech here of what the arrowheads look like on the smog arrows on page 8. They managed to get away into a subway tunnel underneath the headquarters. We then see that the old Avengers are
so while we're on page 8, could you describe for me the Hulk's face on page 8, panel 4?
Yeah. I'm trying to think what it looks like.
There's some bizarre faces in this issue.
Bizarre faces?
Yeah, bizarre faces, yes. It looks like maybe there's a bad smell and he's scrunching up his nose and squinting his eyes.
Yeah, someone's chopping onions.
I was very
Something
upset
like
with the look of Hercules in the pinup later in the issue, but that's, again, I keep getting ahead.
We'll get to that. So then the old Avengers are getting a message from the person who was apparently giving them their marching orders, who was someone called the Scarlet Centurion. He has sort of a cool ghostly effect on him that I kind of like, of these slanted...
Okay, you and I have very different opinions on that. That just comes across to me as just really ugly. I really wish they would have used white Zipatone on him.
They're getting their marching orders from the Scarlet Centurion, who seems to be in charge of the Avengers in this world for reasons that are not exactly clear. Meanwhile, the old Avengers are like, we need to figure out what's going on. I know. Goliath says, I know that at least in our world, and hopefully in this world as well, there is a device called the Herodoton, named after Herodotus, the father of history. And it is a computer at a university somewhere north of here where we can look and see what the recent history is. So they decide.
I made a specific note of that. That is such a, just pull out of nowhere plot device.
Oh, very much. I thought you were going to say that that's a classic Roy Thomas literary reference to, go like, hey, kids, if you know who Herodotus is, then, you got a special treat in this episode. Right. So then suddenly, just when you finally acclimatized yourself to having to look at Heck, Roth, Coletta art, then you get to a beautiful 2-page splash by John Buscema, seemingly inking himself. Nostalgia note, we interrupt this mag to bring you for the first time anywhere a panoramic pinup of every single superhero who has ever been a full-fledged Avenger. Enjoy, Pilgrim. And I always love when Buscema gets to draw the Hulk. He only drew a couple issues of the Hulk's comic, but I like everybody here. Zach, you were saying you don't like Hercules' face. I can see that.
It's just very scrunched up.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's a nice bit of layout otherwise. And again, it makes such a contrast to what we've just gone through. in the first X number of pages, because you have a lot of stuff that should be visually exciting and interesting, and it also feels very cramped. And and then you get a nice, clear action spread. I mean, even the note that you read there from there's like there kind of feels like they're almost apologizing for how this is going so far. Steve, one of the images I sent you is related things. What the creative team for this particular book reminded me of was there was a children's book I read growing up that was called Jeffrey's Ghost and the Leftover Baseball Team. I sent you a copy of the cover there, which is about a ghost that helps a boy who is on the baseball team with all the kids no one else wants. It's the leftovers. And, it's an underdog type story. But when I was looking at, the creative line for this, I was like, this is the leftover baseball team of Marvel Bullpen. Because there's plenty of people here who had done and would do in the future very decent work. Sometimes even great work. Stevie and I have talked about how Don Heck got a bad rap. And there are really a few things about, Vince Colletta could do good work under the right circumstances. And this is a case where, you have all of the B team together on the same book, and it all feels very rushed, and it all feels like they're operating on their greatest weaknesses. I mean, I even feel bad for, Werner Roth. He had a pretty long run on the X-Men. But he's never mentioned because he not part of that memorable stories. The people come, Jack Kirby comes before him. Afterwards, you have Barry Windsor Smith, Steranko, Neil Adams. But even Roy Thomas has kind of denounced his work on the X-Men books. So it's just a lot of people whose work was not their best. No one is really lifting anyone up, I feel, in the creative team. And it is hard to make art. It was very hard to make art, especially when you had the circumstances of the Marvel bullpen at that time. But boy, this is just a case where it did not come together.
Yeah, I agree. So let's go and jump back into the issue. Goliath is going to run the Herodotron. Captain America is going to be the one who hooks his head up into it. Get a little bit of psychedelic imagery, but none of these three artists are particularly good at the psychedelia, so it's not particularly cool looking. They find out the history in this world where just around the time that the Hulk was going to quit the Avengers at the end of Avengers number 2, the Scarlet Centurion shows up. We'll later find out that this is just Kang in disguise, but we had this guy,
spoilers,
kind of cool looking guy. I like the look of the Scarlet Centurion with or without the slices of shading on him that make him look ghostly. He tells them, classic sci-fi story, I will take care of all disease and war and famine, and I will end it all if you guys agree to defeat every hero and villain in the Marvel Universe. And the Avengers, none of whom really should be going for this, they're almost instantly like, yeah, let's do it. And even the Hulk is like, I was about to quit, but hey, if we're going to do that, I'll stick around for that. Hell yeah, I'm up for defeating everybody. So then they're like, okay, let's go and defeat everybody. So then we get a quick montage, is that the word I'm looking for, of them quickly defeating the entire Marvel Universe. First, we see them defeating the Fantastic Four for a page, and then we get just little panels of them defeating Spider-Man, the X-Men, Submariner, Doctor Strange, Daredevil, and even the guys from S.H.I.E.L.D., who I guess qualify as superheroes enough for them to decide that they're worth defeating. So then we get another 2-page splash showing them defeating then all the villains, which is kind of fun. Having this 2-page splash next to the 2-page splash really makes this one look bad because these artists aren't doing as good a job. But it's sort of a fun idea for a splash, and it looks okay. I'm not going to...
And they have a note in, just to try to smooth over the things, pointing out this is just Cap's fevered memory, and that kind of not neatly goes, this is why, the continuity is off.
Yes, exactly. It says final bullpen.
When only came out of retirement, made the Masters of Evil because Cap had come back into the scene, and oh my God, I'm a nerd.
Wait, what?
Final bullpen butt-in. You guessed it, Pilgrim. The foregoing phantasmagoric scene is actually a symbolic montage of the many memories running through Cap's head. But who are we to complain? S plus R. I guess that's Stan plus Roy. So then Cap takes off the Herodotron helmet, says, okay, we figured out what's happening. They think that Scarlet Centurion is going to make everything perfect if they defeat all the heroes. Wasp, poor Wasp, often gets stuck in this position of having to be the person says, wait, if we try to stop the Scarlet Centurion, are we going to rob the Earth of a virtual golden age? And then, of course, Captain America is having none of that. Captain America never likes anything that hinges on freedom.
You say that as though that's a ridiculous thing.
Oh, you naive fool, Captain America. No, I'm with you, Cap. So then Cap says, hell no, we won't go. We're not going along with this. Let's go ahead and take him down. We then get yet another symbolic page of the Scarlet Centurion holding a giant hourglass with the two groups of Avengers on either side. Kind of a cool page. I'm kind of liking this.
And I actually want to note, I think that's a deliberate homage by Roy Thomas. I had a copy when I was younger of the greatest Golden Age stories ever told at DC, which was
I remember that book.
Introduction to it. And he pointed out how he was a huge fan of All-Star Comics with the Justice Society, number 35, where they fight Per Degaton, and the cover shows them looking on a Degaton inside a giant hourglass. Steve, again, the images I sent you, I got his exact quotes here in a picture of that. He actually said he owned a full recreation of that by the original artist Erwin Hazen, former Heroes Con regular, nice guy, rest in peace. I think that splash page is a deliberate homage to that particular story. Because the ending of it is also very similar to the ending of the Justice Society story. And it has a little bit of that Justice Society aspect to it, with the heroes have to split up into different teams to get the different thing for the thing that will solve the thing.
Yes. So to move a little quicker, they do finally figure out that the reason the Wasp fell asleep in that Avengers 56 was because the Scarlet Centurion had made her fall asleep, which at least takes a little bit of the onus off her for this entire screw-up. They realize that they need to reassemble Dr. Doom's time machine, which for some reason has had its pieces stashed, one in a construction site. Like, what's going on here? Why is there a piece of the time machine stashed in a construction site? I don't know. But Hawkeye and Black Panther go there, and they're like, okay, we're going to have to fight some of the old Avengers who have figured out what we're doing. And Hawkeye fights Iron Man. That makes sense. Hawkeye was originally created to fight Iron Man. And once again, poor Black Panther has to fight the Hulk for the second time in the issue. However, it's actually Hawkeye who then, after he defeats Iron Man, zoops in and defeats the Hulk as well, because he hits him with a sort of sound arrow that zips around him and distracts him enough, or does something to him that makes him turn back into Bruce Banner, which is kind of cool. I kind of like that way of defeating the Hulk. I like the fact that it's Hawkeye who gets to do it. And I like the fact that the Black Panther got to hold his own against the Hulk. That was pretty cool too. And then we get to another scene, and they're really rushing through the issue now. There are no backgrounds in this entire scene, and we never find out where they are. But Captain America and Thor have a fight, and similar situation sort of happens where Captain America has somehow guessed that if you keep Thor away from his hammer for 60 seconds, that he'll change into something. He doesn't know what. And then, sure enough, he sees that he turns into this lame physician. You know, and this sort of makes sense that Captain America has been around Thor enough that he might have guessed, he seems to have a whole thing about making sure he picks up his hammer every 60 seconds. So I wonder what would happen if he didn't do that. So that kind of makes sense that he might be able to figure that out on his own.
That was like the one really clever plot point in the issue. And I feel like it should have been a bigger deal. You know, like it. Yeah. If it had a little more time to breathe, it would be like, it's a big moment for Cap. A big realization about his teammate there. He makes rules like, oh, he's like me, before I had the super soldier serum or something. Like, just a really humanizing moment, of identity with this, guy's usually the big blustering god. But it just rushes by very quickly. And
you talk about how if it had room to breathe. Well, I mean, in such a tight economical story like this, you don't have.
You're being sarcastic, I take it, given how long the story is. Yes.
This is a long, drawn-out story.
You also mentioned, Hawkeye fighting Iron Man. It's like, okay, here you have a little chance to have Hawkeye do some self-reflection and go originally, I was on the other side of him. I was misguided. Now it's the other way around. How much have I changed since then? You get the idea. Just like something that shows character growth, that uses the plot to, evolve the character a little bit. And it's just like, again, it feels like some missed opportunities.
Yes.
Sure.
No shortage of those. So they've gotten two pieces of Dr. Doom's time machine now. Finally, Giant Man and the Wasp up against Goliath and the Wasp. And two Wasps are fighting each other. The two Giant Men are fighting each other. I kind of like the way they do this, where the new Wasp, she says, it's a good thing I know myself, how I get careless when I get mad. Otherwise, I would never have outmaneuvered this Wasp. So she uses her own greater emotional maturity to defeat the other Wasp. And then Goliath uses the fact that he knows the other Goliath won't have figured out how to hold his breath as long. What does he say? Oh, he says, in case you're wondering, honey, I beat my alter ego by superior lung power, something I've been working on in case we ever tangled again. In this world, though, Namor's no longer a threat. So Giant Man, to put it mildly, was a wee bit short-winded. So since he's fought Namor more often than the other guy has, he figured he must have learned to hold his breath for longer than the other guy had. So therefore he can defeat them, which I guess is kind of clever.
Once again, something I think that would have made more sense if they'd shown it.
Yeah.
You're like showing them struggling underwater and, who runs out of breath first, draw it out, make it a little more dramatic.
Sure.
And afterwards, here's what I had. And that's not that much of a plan when he describes it.
Yeah, but it's better than nothing. So then they get together, they reassemble Doom's time machine, then the Scarlet Centurion finally shows up to fight them directly. They get in a big fight for several pages. Then, as often happens in Marvel Comics, when they need to wrap things up, the Watcher shows up. And the Watcher shows up, tells them that Scarlet Centurion is really just another version of Kang, and zaps him away. So then they're like, okay, let's reassemble the time machine, go back to Dr. Doom's headquarters. And then you have a trope that I never like in stories, which is that after they're done doing their zap thingy, they seemingly don't remember the events of this issue. And
which is an homage to the Justice Society story. Is it? Because at the end of that story, they've like erased the whole thing that Degaton's done to time, and their memory fades by it, and finally like a mysterious message from the past that they don't know how they got it, and Degaton has never actually even become a big super criminal and is just back to being an ordinary lab assistant. Although he reappears 2 issues later as part of the Injustice Society, and they seem to know him, so continuity errors.
Well, that is the whole problem with these things, is that now if you ever have another Scarlet Centurion issue, you have to have the Avengers go, who are you? And then you have to have a little footnote going like, remember that they forgot about the events of that issue after they lived through them, so you, reader at home, know who this is, but the Avengers don't. And I never like that. To me, if I've read it, if I've experienced this part of the Avengers' lives with them, I want them to remember it for later. But oh well, it's kind of fun.
I did like some of the art in the climax. There's a nice panel where it's like all the Avengers assembled around the assembled time machine, and that's a nice shot. That's a good story shot. It's got the characters together, got a little design there. There's also a little bit where Goliath shrinks down and goes into the machine to mess it up, and that would be done better during the whole Kree-Skrull War storyline.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But again, it's nice to have something that's got a little bit of scale to it. Oddly, when they do the whole Scarlet Centurion backstory thing, they explain, this is, Kang was Ramatut, but then he rescued Dr. Doom. They leave out the whole very confusing, wait, what if Doom and Kang are the same person at different times? Yet they show Doom in the flashback. So
yes.
They never, that particular continuity bit always felt like a bit of, I've just made myself cross-eyed.
Right.
Yes.
It really only makes sense if they're both titanically high.
Yeah.
That's the only way that particular plot point holds any water whatsoever.
When Ramatut and Dr. Doom ran into each other and started tripping on everything.
Like, whoa, wait a minute. But what if I'm actually you and we just don't remember it, man? Right, yeah.
Here's my no prize explanation for that. Well, Victor had been drifting in space with a limited oxygen supply, and Kang had just fled from the hot suns of Egypt. So, and clearly there was a time storm, as mentioned, that was very tricky for him. So, I don't think they were either at their best in that particular.
Right. So, any other final thoughts on the first story in this issue before we move on to the second story?
I just was very disappointed in the art in this main story here. And as we discussed, the story, while it was long and drawn out, felt like it was rushed in places anyway.
Yeah.
It's just, disappointing.
Yeah. It was certainly rushed in terms of like the Thor Captain America battle doesn't have a setting and things like that. There's like some like, Giant Man and Wasp, they're at the docks, and Hawkeye and Black Panther, they're at a construction site, and Thor and Cap are somewhere. But I agree, rushed and yet bloated, all at the same time.
Yes.
Just it has potential. It's a good kernel of an idea for a story because even though it only been a couple years, this was when you did not have trades or, all kinds of reprints or things to go through. So, kind of seeing how the team and the characters had changed, had a certain appeal to it. But it doesn't really, this is opportunities to say, okay, here's how the Avengers as a team and how the individual team members are different from who they were just a few years ago. And then it doesn't even matter because they don't gain any perspective from it because it's all erased from their memories at the end. So
another reason not to do that.
It just it's a very inconsequential story. I mean, the only thing I kind of notable in there was late in the issue. There's a thing where Hawkeye goes, let's just leave the time travel to Alley Oop, which is like, okay, kids in the 60s would definitely get that one. I don't know if people reading it today would know that, but Alley Oop was a comic strip about a caveman that ran for many years, and part of the gimmick was they gave the guy access to a science of a time machine at some point, so he would go to all these different eras and be a caveman and different things, and they would have satire with that. Also inspired a novelty song with the chorus, "Look at that caveman go," which was inspirational to David Bowie, and he homaged it in Life on Mars.
Oh my gosh. I had no idea that was based on a comic strip. That was based on Alley Oop. Yeah, I vaguely remember Alley Oop. We didn't get it in our local paper growing up in Atlanta, but I think when I went to my grandma's house and they had Alley Oop, I'm like, oh, there's other comic strips in here. What is this? It's about a caveman. I never saw any time traveling episodes. So when I read this here, I'm like, wasn't Alley Oop a caveman? How would he have a time machine? But I'll take your word for it. Okay.
Well, actually, you actually describes the thing I loved about going to my grandma's house when I was younger. Yeah, part of it was the newspapers had comics we didn't get in the.
Yes.
Like there was the Dick Tracy movie was coming out, and they had Dick Tracy in that one, or all these different things.
My mother-in-law was in Reading, Pennsylvania, and the Reading, Pennsylvania paper kept lots of the old adventure strips that were still running, going for years after most adventure strips had left most other American newspapers. So she used to save those for me and bring them to me.
Well, that's terrific. I remember, like in the mid '90s, the Hildebrandt brothers did a revival of Terry and the Pirates, and we didn't get it in my paper, and I was ticked because that would have been really neat.
Right.
That'd be really cool. I'd love to see that. Okay, let's go and jump to the story in the back of the issue. Avengers Assemble. We, the undersigned, hereby declaim that Roy Thomas writer, John Buscema artist, Frank Giacoya inker, and Artie Simek letterer are purely and palpably responsible for what follows. You didn't think that Stanley editor was going to take the blame, did ya? D-I-D-J-A. So now we do get Buscema and Giacoya, but doing a completely different style than we've ever seen Buscema do before. This is him doing his sort of Mad Magazine style. And it is fascinating.
The note I made while I was reading this was, it's not a good sign when the parody backup story reads cleaner than the main serious story.
True.
And it's not even his usual style. He's doing the brand act, the Mad Magazine type stuff, but it's clean. It's expressive. There's a lot of, good cartoonish energy to it. There's, some experimental layouts and such on a few things. It is much more visually inventive in its fun than the lead story.
Yes.
100%.
Well, Buscema is much better penciler than Heck and Roth working together. But this story could be funnier. This story seems like a funny story, but it seems funnier than it actually is. This is similar to some of the stories we've had in the backs of other annuals where they always like to create this sense that, we're a big goofy bullpen and we're all interacting with each other, when in reality it was like COVID before COVID in terms of everybody working from home in Marvel Comics at this point. But we have Roy Thomas here, who looks a little different from we've ever seen Roy Thomas looking before. The late 60s have clearly caught up to him. He's got a goatee and a little mustache and kooky glasses, kooky shirt, kooky pants, and he's wearing a necklace with a medallion that just says Grok, which was, of course, a word from the Robert Heinlein novel Stranger in a Strange Land, which was quite popular with the hippies.
And with Charles Manson. I'm sorry.
Charles Manson liked the word Grok?
Well, he liked Stranger in a Strange Land.
Well, there's no accounting for taste. So then Roy Thomas goes ahead, and every panel is completely different. First, he's water skiing, then he is catching up to Don Heck, who is riding a horse and is dressed like a cowboy. Then John Heck's at his drawing board, and they're talking about trying to put together the new issues of the Avengers. However, they're sort of acknowledging that Don Heck has been sort of trading off duties with John Buscema, because then he goes to John Buscema's house, which is a scary castle on a hill. But John Buscema is inside. He is dressed up as Hawkeye. Roy Thomas keeps calling John Buscema BJ. That's his nickname, is BJ. I don't think that's a good idea, but oh well.
I don't think that meant what it means these days. There's the on MASH wasn't the character named BJ, and I don't know. There were characters named BJ. That was a thing.
Yeah, it's one of the things where you couldn't explain why you were offended by it.
Yes. Anyway, calling him BJ, and then they fight each other in all sorts of ways. They finally get the issue put together, and Roy seemingly goes home. And he says, now I can finally get some shut-eye. What was that, Dash and Donnie? You're ready to lay out the other half of the special? I'll be right puff over. For once, even our gregarious young groover is too pooped to palaver. But don't worry, it never lasts long. So then that's the end of... Oh, no, wait, there's one more page. Whoops. There's one more whole page where they work out the rest of the issue. And then Stan Lee finally shows up at the end. It's just me, your old grinning guru. I was just talking on the phone to Jolly Saul Brodsky, and he tells me you're all 3 months late on next month's mags. Then they all keel over dead, plop, plop, plop. And he says, funny, I wonder if it was something I said. The end.
And one thing I notice here is that Stan Lee has his hairpiece and has grown his beard at this point. Last time we saw him portrayed in a Marvel comic, he still was balding and had no facial hair.
Now, I don't think that's true. I think we've seen him like this at least once in the past. I think we may have seen him in last year's annuals looking like this.
After Kirby did Funky Flashman at DC.
Right. But I thought the last time we saw him was an issue of Daredevil where...
Didn't he look like this in that issue of Daredevil? I thought he did.
I'm pretty sure he was still balding at that point.
Okay. Anyway, yes, he has his hairpiece and his facial hair at this point. He is trying to catch up with Roy Thomas looking like a groovy 60s guy. This story is fine. It's good art. It certainly has the sort of dizzying madcap romp feel to it that you would want to have in a funny story, that I just didn't think any of the actual jokes actually landed. But good art, fun story. I always enjoy these little entirely imaginary glimpses into the entirely imaginary bullpen.
Well, I love the caricatures that John Buscema gets here for both himself and Don Heck in particular, Roy as well, but primarily for the two of them. But, one of the things that's really stuck with me, Matt, is something that you were saying about an issue of Not Brand Ech that we were looking at, which is that some of these things have the shape of a joke without being a joke.
Yes. Oh, I'm going through my notes. I was in such a hurry to get to the disappointing credits. We skipped over the title of the main Avengers story. And it's in quotes, ... and time, the rushing river, ... end quote. And I'm like, ooh, what's this a quote from? I got to look up another Roy Thomas literary reference. Well, if you Google End Time, the Rushing River, you get a bunch of references to this comic book. So this is...
I did the same thing. I thought it was a quote. I don't know if he came up with that quote, but I think he maybe modified it from something else. But if he originated that, good for you, Roy. Take credit for that, not Wolverine.
Yes, take credit for that. Did you have any final thoughts on the backup or the main story, Zach?
Well, I felt like the backup was in some ways an apology for the main story.
Yeah.
Because it is all about how they are just completely rushed and overworked and desperate and have to cram things together, and they're still behind. And maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but
no, I think that's right there on the surface.
Again, it's like I was going back through some things like Sean Howe's book, Marvel: The Untold Story.
Right.
Sean Howe is discussing the Kree Skrull War, but I don't mean to be cruel here, but paying tribute to what had come before him with the Kree Skrull War, Thomas seemed to be touring disparate corners of the Marvel Universe with a dustbin and craft glue, picking up the detritus left in Lee and Kirby's wake and fitting it all together. You could argue that it reached new levels of intertextual ecstasy, or you could wonder if it was just a final grand echo of past glories, intoxicating fumes from an empty tank. And I'm like, damn, that harsh, but I wouldn't say that necessarily about the Kree Skrull War, but boy, that made me think of the main story in this. And the backup kind of like has that portrait of okay, the bullpen, we're kind of losing the narrative we've been putting together, this being like this fun, magical place where we're just putting all these crazy things and everything for something, and portrays it a little more in the light of everyone is just literally being worked to death trying to keep it together. We're making fun of it, but there is a slight air of desperation throughout things. And at the end, Stan shows up to just like, I'm still here, still part of the thing. I don't know. Much into it, but this just really has the feeling of it's the era of Marvel where we're kind of losing control over the big, super coherent universe we've played ourselves at being for the last 6 or 7 years. The weight is starting to push up on everybody. We're kind of wary. It's showing up in the art. It's even showing up in our making fun of ourselves.
Yeah,
Sure.
True. Okay.
All right. So let's move on to King Size Special Hulk #1. Hulk battles the Inhumans. Now, we talked about legendary covers. This is, I think, the more legendary of the two covers. And it is, did they make posters of this?
I think, they've definitely done multiple homages to it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of the most homage covers ever. Maybe Stranko's most homage cover, which is saying a lot. We just saw the cover of Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. #4, which is one of his most homage covers, but this one may take the cake. This one may beat it. Both Marvel and DC have used this one a lot. But we should find the cover is the Hulk is being crushed by huge stone letters of the Hulk and then being crushed onto big stone letters of the Inhumans underneath him. And he is struggling mightily. So it says Hulk battles the Inhumans.
And it's a Steranko cover, although my understanding is that John Romita Sr. redrew the face pretty significantly.
Marie Severin did it.
Oh, she did?
Okay. And actually, I was looking this up, and by the way, I was seeing people were like selling graded and slabbed copies of this based solely on the famous Steranko cover. I mean, no one is mentioning the interior story.
Yeah,
right.
But the story behind this issue is more entertaining than the issue itself, in my opinion. Mileage may vary, but basically what happened was, I get reading this like, Steranko was contacted and said, we need a cover for this tomorrow. We're desperate. Can you help us? Huh. He drew this cover overnight, drives into the city to, hand it in, wanting to look decent. When he goes in, he dry shaves himself in the car and gets hit behind, which causes him to cut his face. There is literally his blood on the artwork when he turns this in. And then the punchline is, because he drew the Hulk in a way that was kind of like sweaty, exerting, they had Marie Severin redraw the face to what he called a teddy bear Hulk. And you can find the original black and white version of the art that he did online. There's several things of it. What I also thought was interesting was if you go back to the book we were just reading, in the Avengers Annual, there's an ad for the Hulk Annual in there. And it looks a little closer to me to the original artwork than the version on the final cover.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at the original art. He was even more frustrated in the original art. Yeah. It says, epic original art from Jim Steranko for the Incredible Hulk Annual #1, 1968. Examine closely to truly experience the amazing work he put down in this piece. It's a uniquely brilliant concept with the perfect capture of palpable heaviness and the Hulk's intensity in resisting the crush of weight. And then you can see Severin's just slightly altered page. I mean, it's not desecrated, but it's slightly altered.
Avengers issue, if you have the file open, it's on page 24 of the file there. There's an ad for it, and if you look at the Hulk's face there, it looks a lot closer.
Huh.
Okay, so let's go ahead and try to get into this. This is a big issue. Not in terms of like, wow, this is a big issue. It's more like, wow, it's a lot.
I felt like I wanted to have you summarize this issue because I feel like if I'm going to summarize this issue, I could either summarize it in 5 minutes or in 35 minutes. Because on the one hand,
really summarize it in about a minute, but
if you just take a step back, it's like the Hulk fights the Inhumans and everybody turns on each other several times, and then the issue ends. So that's the 1 minute summary. But then we can get into
that is about what I had to say.
Detailed summary. Yes. What were you going to say, Steve?
The title of the book is A Refuge Divided. Stan Lee proudly presents a Gary Friedrich Marie Severin super-length spectacular inked by Sid Shores and almost the whole blamed bullpen lettered by I. Watanabe. So Sid Shores, not my favorite inker, but we don't know what Sid Shores inked and what other people inked, because apparently they just had to share pages around to the bullpen and get this thing done.
Yes.
Like the other book we covered, this has a certain transparency about the desperation that went into its making.
Yes.
Although, again, Steranko, he did that cover overnight.
Yeah, and that was a legend. So the Hulk somehow, for some reason, is in Europe. I don't know if we have any explanation for why he's in Europe, but he is in the Alps somewhere, scares a peasant who then runs off to his village to try and get some people to deal with the monster. Hulk just wants to be left alone. It turns out that we are really near where the Great Refuge is, which is apparently somewhere in the Alps at this point. I think at one point it was in the...
it was originally in the Andes.
In the Andes.
Then it was in the Himalayas. Now it's in the Alps. Now, it's totally unclear if it's moving around or if they have multiple Great Refuges. Both of those things could make sense. We've certainly got to see them move the city later by lifting it by Black Bolt screaming in a way that causes the whole city to lift up and go flying off. That's when it finally goes flying off to the moon. But this panel is definitely a Marvel No Prize Book panel where it shows him flying down to the Great Refuge in the Alps. And they just say in the No Prize Book that this was just a mistake. But I'm not sure it's a mistake. I go for the theory that they have multiple Great Refuges in all of the world's great mountain ranges, which that makes a certain sort of sense to me.
So Black Bolt is returning to the Great Refuge from somewhere, and he is picking up his scepter of his scepter of justice to go ahead and dispense justice on his people. And once again, I just have to say that the whole absolute monarchy, where he is both the monarch and the Supreme Court judge and, everything else all in one. I'm like, I don't like this. I'm personally a big fan of, constitutional democratic republics, but it is what it is. So he is passing judgment on a group of rebels. Now, one thing I do like about this is that we get to see more of the Inhumans than just the ruling family. Oftentimes it's like, oh yes, I am a king and here's my family. And who are you ruling over?
No, I really love getting to see more Inhumans in this issue. So we should say that Jack Kirby has been doing the Inhumans all by himself. No one else has ever done the Inhumans. It's been really Kirby's baby. It's been, his own explosion of creativity and art and his visual imagination. And another artist has to step up and see if she is worthy of this sort of legacy. And I think Marie Severin does just a great job in this issue with the visual imagination. I think her city, her Great Refuge, looks just gorgeous. Already you can see on page 3, the Great Refuge looming in the background. It looks like a great sci-fi city. I love the designs of the new Inhumans we get on page 4. And I love that suddenly this feels like a real city for the first time and not just one family with a bunch of nameless people in the background.
Yeah, the characters introduced out of nowhere. I like the designs on them.
Yes.
There's just a lot of difficulty sometimes with the backgrounds around them or where they're looking at the panel. Again, these things we'll get to pretty quickly here. But they're nice, intriguing designs. And there's some good characterization with them, but some of it comes across more visually than it does through we'll get to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're introduced on page 4 to Falcona the Huntress, Leonis the Lion Man, Aereo the Floating Man, Timberius the Tree Dweller, Stalior the Centaur, and Nebulo, he who appears but as an uncast shadow.
Which is not visible in the panel that he's introduced in.
No.
I think they covered him up with the speech balloons. I think that basically whoever placed the speech balloons didn't recognize that was an important thing that they were covering up.
And it's so frustrating because the later sequences in the issue with him are my favorites. But the first several pages where he's present, he's not actually visible as even the shadow he's supposed to be.
Yep, I agree. That was a huge problem.
So the Centaur is trying to plead his case that he is actually loyal. He was just led astray by his fellow defendants here. They then turn on him, and which is a little bit like, oh, hey, I'm just going to try to throw these people under the bus, even though I clearly was doing this stuff as well. Black Bolt is merciful to them in that he doesn't have them executed, which I guess if they were committing treason would be a reasonable punishment. But still, he then banishes them to the unplace. Now, were they explicitly trying to bring about Maximus as ruler,
No,
or
they have not been associated with Maximus until halfway through the issue, when suddenly Maximus tries to take advantage of their rebellion.
That was really frustrating to me because we don't see what they've actually done. We don't know why they were together. And for the life of me, throughout the issue, I kept flip-flopping on whether Stalior truly was loyal to Black Bolt or was just a weasel. And that made him the most interesting character to me.
Yeah.
Because they're not consistent with it in the story itself. It actually made me want to see a lot more stuff with Stalior, like Justice for Stalior or something. Because like the idea of a flawed soldier trying to redeem himself is an interesting, and plus it's a centaur. Centaurs are a great visual. This vacillate between, oh, he's truly loyal to Black Bolt once, oh, no, wait, he's truly part of the traitors and is just a weasel. But they don't have any resolution to it. And it's like the most interesting part of the story.
So I should say that it's always very important to me with Black Bolt stories, whether or not he has any sort of sign language or not, or whether or not people just try to read his face and go like, oh, we'll never know what our leader thinks. Like, well, then he's a crappy leader because he could learn sign language. He could get a pad and paper. He could do something. But here he does seem to be using sign language, and he does seem to be communicating his full thoughts to the person who is speaking for him. And he seems like a good leader and a good communicator, which I always like.
Yes. So Lockjaw then takes these folks to the unplace, but then seems to not come back to the Great Refuge itself, but happen to be nearby where the Hulk is, who's being chased by the villagers. And Hulk and Lockjaw get into a fight, which is a fun visual. And then Lockjaw takes Hulk also to the unplace and drops him off there.
And speaking of unplace, I'm sorry, I'm just spoiled by the negative zone and all those crazy dimensions in Doctor Strange. The unplace does not look substantially different from the Great Refuge or from anywhere. They just don't really establish it as a place in and of itself.
Yeah, Marie Severin could have brought more visual imagination to the unplace. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think she was in a hurry.
But we should say that this is the last we're going to see of Marie Severin. Marie Severin is off of the Hulk book at this point. She's been replaced by Herb Trimpe. So this is her last gasp as a Hulk artist. And really her last gasp as a Marvel superhero artist. She does very little Marvel superhero work after this annual, which is a shame because I love her.
Well, and I've got to say, I really liked the work that she did on Doctor Strange, largely just because of her take on the kind of psychedelic Strange imagery. But I'm not the biggest fan of the art in this book. And
this particular issue?
In this particular issue, yeah.
Well, of course, if they've got every single inker passing the pages around,
Yeah. Yep. Anyway, Hulk is trying to break himself out of the so-called unplace. And meanwhile, Maximus, who's realized that he might be able to make use of these rebels, is trying to do something technologically from the outside to also break down the unplace. And so the Hulk is eventually able to shatter the barrier and get himself out of there along with the other folks. Hulk is like, basically, nobody likes me. I don't like anybody else. Get out of here. Leave me alone. The rebels seem to think that maybe we need to have this guy on our side. But then Maximus shows up and he's wearing that goofy looking crown that we have seen in previous appearances. But yeah, I guess he thinks if I'm wearing the crown, maybe people will treat me as king.
But I gotta say, yeah, at one point the Centaur says to Hulk, there comes a day when every man must have at least one he can call friend. And Hulk goes, horseman lies. Hulk has never had friend. It's like, wow, if Rick Jones were privy to this issue, he would not be a very happy man. He's like, dude, I have done so much for you.
Hulk's very consistent in this issue. But even like you look at his dialogue, but then he'll use the first person, I within like the same word balloon. Like he keeps going from the third to first. He goes, Hulk do this, but it's not, because there's like all different types of Hulk personalities. There's like the more articulate one that we saw in the Avengers Annual. There's the one that is very much Hulk dumb, speak short things. And this one kind of goes between Hulk third person and Hulk have slightly more articulate sentences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this is Gary Friedrich, who is the third tier writer for Marvel at this point. So I think, Matt, at one point you were saying something about Roy Thomas is the poor man's Stan Lee and Gary Friedrich is the poor man's Roy Thomas.
Yes, very much so.
Yes. So anyway, now I don't know where Black Bolt is at this point, but apparently Black Bolt
disappears for a large chunk of the story.
Right. So he just seems to have disappeared after acting as judge. And Maximus, meanwhile, is throwing himself into this power vacuum and just being like, hey, people, follow me.
He just plays very much as Timu Loki.
So Hulk, meanwhile, is trying to get out of the Great Refuge and is not succeeding in doing so. He's ending up wrecking much destruction in the city as he's trying to get out. We then see that Maximus is trying to harness the power of, what's the name of this old scientist? Romnar. So Maximus is trying to harness the substance that had been discovered by the scientist Romnar, who discovered,
known as Ick.
It's Ick. Yes, that's basically what it is. But he had discovered this stuff that would devour anything that it came in contact with and absorb its energy. And they eventually were able to tame it and hide it away. But Maximus is like, ooh, if we can go get this stuff, then maybe I can use it as a weapon to take back over. Everybody's turning on each other. Nobody trusts each other now that Maximus is involved in all of this stuff. But yeah, there is a really good sequence on page 26 of Nebulo, the Shadow Man, taking out a guard. And you just get to see the shadow play going on.
That was my favorite art in the whole issue.
Yeah.
It's very well done. It really evokes the James Whale, the Invisible Man from the 1930s. And it has like a very creepy quality to it because it's like he takes out the guard by grabbing at the guy's shadow. It's like, wow, that's kind of an odd and interesting power set. Also, I was reminded on social media of a scene from the 80s movie Killer Clowns from Outer Space, a bit where the killer clowns take out some people by forming monstrous shadow puppets. And I'm like, I wonder if he could have that power too. But thinking, but Nebula is a really cool visual element in this story. Again, like the designs are really good for all of the evil Inhumans. There's like some hints of characterization with some of them, like Stalios. I said, I just wish they would like kind of explain what they want and why they want it a little bit more. Because it just always seems to shift as they're an alliance, they're not an alliance, they're working with Maximus, they're not working with Maximus. What's their overall deal?
Yeah, everything shifts many times in this issue.
Yeah, I would like to have a little bit more about what's going on there. Is it just that they don't want a monarchy? Is it that they want somebody else to then rule the monarchy? Is it just that they're rebels without a cause? Well, I don't know. I would like to know more.
I feel like if Kirby had gotten to do a full-on Inhuman series, he did the stories in Amazing Adventures, but those were half the book, and he left because I believe that was he left because he went to DC to do the Fourth World at that point. But I feel like if he'd gotten to do a full-length Inhumans book with control over it, he could have really done I, Claudius as a Marvel comic.
That'd be great.
They hadn't done the TV version, obviously, at that point, but you really could have had this kind of nice Shakespearean type of intrigue and backstabbing and who is aligned with who and who is good and who is bad. And it's always changing. Just there's this lovely, theatrical quality to it. And I'm just bummed he didn't get to do that book because I think if he had, the characters might have a much more interesting place in overall comics history, as opposed to what they've been, which is visually interesting characters who are sometimes part of really great stories, but can't really sustain their own book. And then there was that whole thing a decade ago where Marvel tried to reposition them as the mutant equivalents for various licensing type reasons, which I do not fully understand the thing. But
Right.
it has left a bad taste in many people's mouths with those characters.
Yes.
Yeah.
To get back to this, Nebulo at one point is able to finally get Hulk on the side of the rebels by shooting one of the planes that is trying to stop the Hulk's destruction. And he's like, oh, okay, well, you're shooting that guy who is shooting at me, so maybe you are my friend. So, okay, I'll throw in with you and your people. But none of the other people really trust him anyway. Everybody is very distrustful, but they're able to get Hulk to burst his way in to get the substance of Romnar, at which point Maximus is somehow able to harness it into some kind of a gun that he's then able to use.
Again, would have been Maurice never does a good work with boy Kirby doing these strange substance and creating a big crazy laser gun type thing from it. How would that have looked?
Yeah. So once again, we have the weird absence of Black Bolt. We have Gorgon standing in for him and trying to make the case for the royal family, but it's really unclear why Black Bolt isn't here able to do it himself.
Yeah, again, I feel like he'd really given Black Bolt a bit of an arc in this story. I think it could have been much more powerful because, I don't know, but he just feels like a plot device in this particular tale.
Yeah.
He's there when it needs him.
Right. So the rebels betray the Hulk here, and then suddenly Black Bolt is back. Where from? We don't know. But he is back, and he now is able to take that gun with the power of the substance of Romnar and just punches Maximus across the face. Although actually, so page 36, panel 3, the perspective doesn't really work well in that photo. The perspective doesn't really work well in that panel.
Wait, are you telling me these aren't photos? I thought this was all real. Wait just a second. Are these lies?
Yes, these are lies. So page 36, panel 3, Maximus should be much larger than he is in that picture. Yeah. It looks like Black Bolt's fist is about the same size as Maximus's head, even though Maximus's head should be closer to us. But once again, I just really get the feeling this issue was done in a rush.
Man, that should be a great iconic power shot.
Oh, yeah. No, if you could do that as a whole splash page, just Black Bolt decking Maximus. Yeah, that
there's several panels on this page that could have been really terrific. I mean, there's a great kafoom sound effect in the first panel, but the panel itself is crammed into as part of a 2-tier grid. Mm-hmm, doesn't have much of an effect. Next panel, get close up with Maximus and Leonis, whatever, looks like Ron Perlman in Beauty and the Beast. The gun and the kind of claw gauntlet or whatever, I can't tell what is what. They seem kind of merged together. There's a nice design on Maximus's regal uniform. You see what I mean? There's like a nice element in each panel, but there's also elements that just completely blur everything together. Panel 3, Leonius, he feels like a floating head almost.
Well, on page 37, at one point, Hulk yells, "Hulk attacks!" And then a couple of panels later, "Hulk kill!" Which, once again, I don't think the Hulk is supposed to be killing anybody here.
They even explicitly have early in the story make a point when he throws a rocket to cause an avalanche. They, Hulk not mean to kill the guy, just wants to scare him.
I just tried to crush him in an avalanche. I wasn't trying to kill him. Like, people survive being crushed in avalanches all the time. What are you talking about?
Stelior once again is then turning against the rebels once again. And yeah, it really does sort of come across like he's being somewhat of a weasel here to me, in that you keep on throwing in with these people and then you keep on betraying them. And it just seems like, you know what? You just suck all around.
But I liked the whole thing of he admits, I'll probably die fighting you, but at least I will maybe have one moment of redemption. But it could go either way. I still feel like, okay, again, Stelior has potential as a character.
So on page 40, I love where the Hulk uses Tiberius as a weapon against the Centaur. He says, "Tree Man will make good weapon to finish Horseman," which I think is an inspired line of dialogue.
It also really has a note on the first panel. couple of the Inhumans said, well, they aren't damaging any property, so Black Bolt's order, we let them destroy each other.
Sure, why not?
How are they not damaging property?
So Falcona is able to summon a whole flock of birds of prey to bring to the fight, which we will see again in a moment.
And you wouldn't think that, like, the Hulk versus Falcons would be a very fair fight, like those poor Falcons. But no, they make it look pretty impressive. Severin does a really nice job of having just thousands and thousands of Falcons swarming the Hulk, to the extent where you actually feel bad for the Hulk. You're like, oh my God, getting swarmed by that many thousands of Falcons would be no fun.
Bible page 41, there's a nice kind of Kirby type shot of her gesturing, and the great green one who stands in the air arena, my pretties. I'm like, ooh, little Wizard of Oz shout out there.
Well, yeah, when Severin was doing Doctor Strange, she channeled a lot of Wizard of Oz. I think that maybe Friedrich realized that that's what Severin was doing.
Yes. Black Bolt had seized the weapon that Maximus has, but then Nebulo is able to steal it back again. And we're going to see where that goes in a minute, or do we? I don't know. One way or the other. There are some loose plot threads in this issue. We have that whole scene where the birds of prey are attacking the Hulk, but then Black Bolt shows up and, through control of the very atmosphere, Black Bolt shatters her power over the creatures. The air suddenly very thin. I can hardly breathe. This is just, once again, I really just want Black Bolt to have a power set that is stable, that just, we know what his powers are, not just like, oh, guess what? He can control the atmosphere. Like, what is he, like Molecule Man now? Like, what's going on?
He's got a glowing fork on his head.
A lot of stuff in these stories reminded me of an Onion article I come back to many times. Matt, you probably know yourself, where it's sci-fi writer attributes all confusion to quantum flux. It's like everything, every plot hole or continuity areas is because of some time warp thing called quantum flux. There's a lot of quantum flux in this story.
Yeah.
So Black Bolt and Hulk get into an epic fist fight, which is quite well done. Then eventually Black Bolt is able to knock out the Hulk by speaking a single word, and he's just hoping that the Hulk can absorb most of that so that it doesn't do as much damage to the city. It does look like they're going to have to completely repave that entire plaza now.
Yeah.
Then Nebulo shows up with the weapon. He's about to take out Black Bolt, but then Hulk comes and saves the day. The rest of the Inhumans are all like, dude, this guy's dangerous. We need to get him out of here. Black Bolt is like, no. This is a great refuge, and this guy needs a refuge. I am inviting him to stay here. And Hulk is like, maybe Black Bolt understands, but other people don't. They still fear Hulk. So no matter what Black Bolt says, Hulk could never live here in peace. And he heads back out to be on his own once again. And I'm hearing the closing music from the Hulk TV show as he wanders out into the Alps.
Do, 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 do.
Yes, exactly.
Gorgon is not drawn very consistently in these things. In fact, they even show him with human feet on
really?
page 50.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
It's about page 49, and he's got a very strange face. He wasn't trying to save us. He just sought revenge on Nebulo. He didn't actually try to save the Inhumans. He was still breaking things. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing about him going back and forth between having human feet and having hooves reminds me of the Inhumans TV show, where
yes, that's what I was tiptoeing around earlier.
Towards the end of the show, like, they weren't even trying to just do a shot from the waist up and you hear clop, clop, clop as he walks around. It's just like, no, you just see his full-on boots. They were just like, we just have to get this contractually a mandated thing out of the way. Let's just go ahead and do it as cheaply as we can.
Yes, I mean, when I see that show, it's like, okay, these characters, it'll definitely let us, have like an alternative to the X-Men. Oh, wait, we have to do effects every week where a woman has animated hair. There's a giant teleporting dog. So let's make sure we lose the dog and have the woman's hair cut. You can just You see them like
Yeah.
desperately
No,
caught.
Zach, at some point later, I can go through with you what I found with my research on the timeline of exactly what happened there. But that's not something we need to go into right now.
Exactly, sir.
So the final thing we've got in here is a splash page Marvel Masterwork pinup. The Incredible Hulk has been drawn by more different artists than almost any other Marvel superstar. Can you identify the various illustrators represented on this page? To give you a clue, we've tossed in their initials, Soft-Hearted Stan. So we've got Jack Kirby with John Romita, Jack Kirby with Dick Ayers, Jack Kirby with Joe Sinnott. And then we've got Mickey DeMeo, we've got Bill Everett, we've got John Buscema and John Verpoorten, we've got Steve Ditko, Marie Severin, Herb Trimpe, John Romita, and Gil Kane, presumably.
We've been doing this podcast for too long. I could not remember Mickey DeMeo's name to save my life. I'm like, MD? Who on earth is MD? And I'm like, well, later there was the artist MD Bright, which is sometimes how Mark Bright was credited. But I'm impressed you were able to summon up the name Mickey DeMeo from Marvel's past.
So that was this issue, and it has a legendary cover. The inside was when I was rereading it today to prepare for this recording, I was flipping through the book and I was like, wait, what page am I on? How far do I have to go? Oh, dear God, I still have like a dozen pages. And it did feel a little bit like it could have been tightened up a little bit.
Yeah. I think I liked this issue more than you guys did. I really just love Severin's visual imagination. To me, this is just Severin getting one last chance to play in the sandbox that is the Marvel Universe and really get to take something that Kirby had started but never really finished, this telling the story of the Inhumans in their city and, who actually lives there. And Kirby had never given us the second half of that story. He'd never really gotten to know anybody outside the royal family. And I really think she just really stands up and does a great job delivering that second half of the story that he never did. And I find I'm not a fan of Friedrich's scripting. I'm not a fan of Friedrich's co-plotting. Depending on whether you want to give Friedrich or Severin credit for the plot. And like I said, the whole thing, it just sort of has a bit of feeling of one damn thing after another in terms of all of the crosses, double crosses, triple crosses, plot reversals. But I think I like this issue more than either of you did. What do you say, Zach?
I think there's good elements of the story here. I think there's some, very nice designs. You mentioned like it being like the other half of the story. I think part of the issue with it is it's a story where you don't need the Hulk. I mean, that's sometimes a problem in Hulk stories. Sometimes he's just the big green Deus Ex Machina that comes in. But it's like essentially meeting the evil versions of the Inhuman royal family, but you don't have most of the royal family there. Actually, kind of like made some notes as to like how they correspond, like Stelior, Gorgon, Medusa, Aereo, Triton, Tiberius, Crystal, maybe? Which autocreature Leonoids, Karnak, I don't know, but they all have kind of like corresponding elements of their abilities. But again, the problem is, again, it really needs a specific point of view and theme to work as a story, and it just kind of plays off. Now these people are good, bad. Oh wait, now these have turned on each other. Now these have turned on each other. Now these have turned on each other, and it just be like, I'd say, at least 20% less plot and just let the visuals breathe.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I just really love Nebulo. Nebulo is just a great character, just this living shadow who keeps plotting and double-crossing and turning on everybody. He alone would make the issue worth my 25 cents if I were spending this.
Yeah. They did not do much more with this particular set of characters. I looked it up, and there's a handful of appearances, but there's no, again, real arc for most of them. And it's like, now they're part of the Royal Guard again. Oh, now they're not. But I feel like, again, aside from my Stelior fandom, here's like Nebula just feels like someone who needs to get, recruited into some book or something. They use them in the movies or the TVs. It's a much less complicated special effect than doing living hair or a giant teleporting bulldog. Get this guy out there, MCU. Use what you got.
Cut to 10 years from now, every single Marvel character will have had their own Disney Plus show. So it's just a matter of time before we have the Nebula Disney Plus show.
Speaking of which, have both of you seen Wonder Man at this point?
I've not.
I heard it's very good.
Oh, neither of you have seen it.
No, I haven't seen a frame of it.
Ben Kingsley is a delight. I mean, so is Wonder Man, but just their bromance is just so well done.
Yeah, I've heard good things.
Well, he is the part I'm looking forward to when I make some time to watch it, because you know what? I actually enjoyed him in Iron Man 3. The backlash was not his fault. And when they brought him back in Shang-Chi, I was one of the many people in the audience who just went, yeah! And they just had such fun with him. And he does great kind of self-parody.
Yes.
This role.
Yes. I encourage both of you to see it post haste.
Yes.
And they're very short episodes. You can finish the thing in one day.
Okay.
See, they've kind of like been learning the right lessons from their earlier series. But it's gotten to the point now where it's like, well, not that many people are watching at this point. Like, okay, we need our shorter episodes, tighter plots, do it in a way where we can have more effects. It just seems like it took them a long time to kind of learn we can't do a full-scale Marvel production as a weekly network TV series. You see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Anyway, I strongly recommend it to both of you. It's a very tight series and very entertaining.
Very tight as opposed to this month's 2 annuals.
Right, exactly.
Thematic tying together.
There you go. All right, I think we have come to the end of this particular endeavor that we're doing today. So
it's a good thing we didn't try to cover all 4 annuals in one podcast. This is
I probably would have tried to tighten things up a little bit more if we did. So, any further thoughts either of you has to add or offer before we go ahead and do our sign off?
I think that these were 2 good annuals. Neither one was as great as they could be, but both of them have stuff to recommend them. I preferred the Hulk one because I like a lot of course, I love the cover, and I like a lot of the art on the inside as well. I didn't like the art in the Avengers Annual, but I thought the writing wasn't bad. And all told, I think that we have not presented Zack with the worst comics we could have presented him with. I think that these are 2 pretty good comics.
No, I would say these were mostly painless. There you go.
Painless comics. Good. That's a good thing for a comic to be.
And, again, as critical as I've been of a lot of stuff here, it's hard to finish anything. It's hard to get something together. And doing it at the time they were doing it, they did not have scanning. They did not have emails. They were just producing these in not optimal conditions. I think we have to give credit for the fact that they were even able to meet the dreaded deadline doom with these and all of them. And again, it's a case of where it's like you throw a lot of things against the wall and you still find some things that work. There's creative elements, some interesting things, and even things like the Steranko cover that was thrown together and nearly got him killed trying to deliver it. But we're still looking at it decades later.
Yeah, you were saying they didn't have email. I imagine they were constantly meeting over this issue, going this could have been an email in 30 years, but now it can't. Oh no, what are we going to do?
Yes.
I just mean, the inter-office communication.
Yes. Oh no, you're totally right. We don't realize how much that helps us do what we do, and sometimes seems like it's hindering us in doing what we want to do. But you're right. We take it for granted.
All right. So thank you very much for coming to join us today. So I want to thank all of our listeners for being out there. I definitely prefer speaking to people who want to hear me rather than just shouting into the void. I'm doing enough of that these days in other contexts, shouting into the void. Also, thank you to our Patreon patrons. We very much appreciate you supporting us. Also, Matt, somehow we already have as many downloads this year as we had all of last year.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Well, we put out a good podcast, so maybe that's why.
Maybe so.
When you create consistently, it builds on itself.
Perhaps so. Okay, thank you, everybody. Once again, please rate and review us on either Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or wherever you get this podcast, and that helps other people to find us. And I think that is about it. So thank you very much, everybody. And we will be back with the next month of Marvel Comics in a couple of weeks.
Yep. And then we'll get around to the other 2 annuals, I think, in about 7 episodes.
Something like that.
Okay. All right.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks. Take care. Stay safe out there. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, we now have a Patreon where you can show your appreciation. If you've got a few bucks, head over to patreon.marvelrereadclub.com to support us. Also, you can still rate and review us at your podcatcher of choice, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. You can find us online at marvelrereadclub.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. See you next time.